Before we begin, I will go over the emergency response plan for this room. In an emergency, everyone must evacuate through the nearest safe exit. Those seated in the gallery take direction from security, and council takes direction from myself. After evacuating the room, please proceed to the nearest building, exit, and go to the muster point. Please do not take an elevator or walk through the city room. Anyone with limited mobility should identify themselves to security or myself during an evacuation, and please speak with security or myself if you require first aid. Thank you.
Well, good morning and welcome to the first meeting of the Urban Planning Committee for this council term. I'd like to start by calling this meeting to order and taking a moment to reflect on our place on this land. So Edmonton is at the heart of Treaty 6. From time immemorial, diverse Indigenous nations have stewarded these lands, including the Nehiyawak, Nehewiniwak, Nakota Iska, Dene Selina, and Nitsitsapi. Many more First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples have gathered, traded, and celebrated on these lands for generations. This place also forms part of the Métis homeland, and Edmonton is within the Otipemisiwak Métis government, Fort Edmonton Métis district. Edmonton is also home to one of the largest Inuit communities south of the 60th parallel. The signing of Treaty Number 6 in 1886-87 created a foundation of good relations, welcoming peoples to this area from around the world. Today, Edmonton carries on this tradition of welcoming peoples from many nations as we continue to live into the spirit and intent of treaty. Now roll call of my committee colleagues. Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Jans.
Good morning.
And Councillor Paquette.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're also joined in River Valley Room by Councillors Joanne Wright.
Good morning.
Councillor Morgan.
Morning.
And Councillor Salvador.
Good morning.
Councillor Rutherford.
Good morning.
Councillor Parmar.
Good morning.
And I believe that might be all. Am I missing anyone? Great, thank you.
Good morning.
Oh, Mayor Knack, good morning. Thank you for joining us. And Mayor Knack is a member of this committee. I will now ask that before we consider today's agenda, I request all members of council present, if they have any pecuniary or conflicts of interest, to declare regarding any of the items to be discussed. A pecuniary interest exists when an item could monetarily affect a member of council, their employer, or family member. And a conflict of interest exists when an item could affect a private interest of a member of council, their employer, or family member. Do any members of council have a pecuniary or conflict of interest to declare? Hearing none, we will move on to the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Clark.
So move the adoption of the agenda. Do you want me to read the changes on it, or are we okay?
I don't think we have any.
Oh, okay.
So we can just approve as is.
Yep.
Great. So committee members, please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Thank you, Councillor Jans. Thank you, Councillor Paquette. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that's carried. Councillor Clark, approval of the minutes.
So move the approval of minutes from November 24th, Special Urban Planning Committee.
Thank you. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette.
Sorry, e-scribe's being difficult. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Knack. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that's carried. I'm not aware of any protocol items, so we'll move on to selections of items for debate. Not seeing anyone click on. I will select 7.2. And I believe we have speakers on 7.1 as well. Madam Clerk, I understand that the speakers registered for 7.3 only wish to speak if it was selected.
That's correct.
Okay. And so I'm not hearing anyone looking to select 7.3. So we will vote on the remaining items, which include 5.1 and 7.3. So just asking my colleagues to vote on the revised due date for the mid-block redevelopment amendments and 7.3 Highway 19 Neighborhood Structure Plan authorization. Please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that's carried. Right, and now to request to speak. Councillor,
Chair Stevenson, before we move on, may I?
Summarize what we've accomplished this morning.
Thank you. So this morning, committee approved the recommendations as follows. Item 5.1, mid-block redevelopment amendments with a revised due date of February 10, 2026, and 7.3, Highway 19 Neighborhood Structure Plan Council authorization.
Thank you very much. So yeah, Councillor Clark, if you'd like to read the motion for our speakers on 7.1 and 7.2.
Sure thing. So on 7.1, the Ribbon of Green strategic plan, that urban planning committee hear from the following speakers in panels when appropriate. So 7.1 Ribbon of Green strategy plan. So the first speaker I have is Kyle Sholey, and that's going to be remote. And check if he's here.
No.
Okay. Second one is going to be Christine Archibald from the River Valley Alliance. That's going to be remote as well. Number 3 is Raquel, I believe, Farelli. That's going to be remote. Number 4 is going to be Joe Yurkovich from the Edmonton Mountain Bike Alliance in person. Number 5 is going to be Aaron Budnick from the YG Bike Coalition in person. I believe Aaron's here. And then number 6 is going to be Jesse Watson remote. And then if I keep going down the list on 7.2, so I mean I could read out the urban planning committee here from the following speakers in panel appropriate for 7.2, Kettle Lakes Neighborhood or Structure Plan Council authorization. Number 1 is Gadsel Latif in person. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. Number 2 is going to be Scott Cole in person. Number 3 is going to be Elise Shillington in person. And number 4 is going to be Peter Tuskaskis. Probably butchered that last name, and that's in person as well. And that it wraps up all the speakers.
Great, thank you very much. Committee members, please vote on hearing from those speakers.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that's carried. I see no request for time specific on the agenda, which will bring us to our first item on 7.1. So I'll turn it over to administration. Just for speakers who may not have been here before, we'll hear from administration. Then I'll set some parameters for our public speakers, and then we'll hear from you and ask questions. So we'll go to administration to start. Thank you.
Good morning, members of committee. We're here today to present a report about one of our city's most valued spaces, the River Valley and Ravine System. More than 20 years ago, the city developed the first comprehensive strategic plans for the River Valley, the Ribbon of Green Concept Plan and Master Plan. Those plans served us well for many years, guiding the city's decisions about ecological protection and parkland access and development. In recent years, there's been a growing need to renew our planning direction for the River Valley. In 2025, administration completed this work and is pleased to share the new Ribbon of Green strategic plan. The new plan builds on the philosophy and the vision of the Ribbon of Green concept and master plans to protect the River Valley for future generations and ensure that Edmontonians are able to access and enjoy it. With the completion of this updated strategic plan, we're here today to request that Council repeal the 1992 Ribbon of Green, Ribbon of Green Master Plan. With me to present an overview of the Ribbon of Green and proposed next steps is Angela Hobson, Principal Ecological Planner with Planning and Environment Services. And I should introduce myself. My name is Huayda, I'm the Director of Urban Growth and Open Space. Next slide, please. The city plan identifies the River Valley and Ravine system as the backbone of Edmonton's Green and Blue Network, our system of open spaces. It is a highly valued ecological, recreational, and active transportation corridor, a place of cultural significance, a community gathering place, and a draw for visitors to our city from across the region and beyond. Today, the River Valley and Ravine system supports an Edmonton metro region population of approximately 1.6 million people. As our city and region grow, so does the desire for access and recreation in the River Valley. At the same time, we need to understand and address the impacts of climate change, biodiversity loss, and urban development on the ecological health of the River Valley. Through the implementation of the plan, we also have important opportunities through this work to collaborate with our Indigenous partners on River Valley planning, programming, and stewardship as we work to honor our commitments as reflected in the Indigenous framework. Next slide, please. For the past 4 years, city staff have been talking with Edmontonians about this beloved space through the River Valley Planning Modernization Project. The project was focused on updating our planning to ensure that the River Valley remains a vibrant and ecologically resilient network as the city grows. As part of the River Valley Planning Modernization Project, we heard many perspectives on how the River Valley should be planned and managed, including a desire to see it remain as undeveloped as possible with ecological protection and restoration prioritized above all, as well as an interest in enhanced access, recreation, cultural opportunities that respect the nature and character of the River Valley. Next slide, please.
The River Valley Planning Modernization Project included 2 streams of work: completion of the Ribbon of Green Strategic Plan and renewal of the North Saskatchewan River Valley Area Redevelopment Plan, or River Valley ARP. Together, these plans provide an integrated planning framework for the River Valley. The Ribbon of Green provides high-level planning guidance for protection, access, and use. It contains system-wide direction about how the city will protect and activate the River Valley, as well as guidance for programming, amenities, and ecological restoration in different parts of the system. The River Valley ARP is our statutory plan for the River Valley, a legally binding document that provides the rules that guide our decisions about proposed development. In August of 2025, Council approved the renewed River Valley ARP through the public hearing process. The 2 plans are now directly connected. The River Valley ARP references the Ribbon of Green for direction on River Valley open space lands, which make up the majority of publicly accessible city-owned lands in the River Valley. Next slide, please. The Ribbon of Green sets out a vision for the future of the River Valley, that the River Valley and Ravine system is a connected, protected, ecologically resilient landscape that honors our collective history and promotes healthy living through diverse opportunities for recreation, active transportation, learning, and gathering in the tranquility of nature. Next slide, please. The Ribbon of Green primarily guides the city and our partners regarding city-owned lands. It does not change the development rights of private landowners. It helps us to think about the River Valley as a complete and integrated network of open spaces, giving us a system-level lens through which to consider site-specific decisions. It is important to note that the Ribbon of Green is a starting place for more detailed River Valley planning. This future planning will take many forms, including, for example, the design and program for a new park, a management strategy for controlling erosion on a vulnerable slope, a trail alignment study, or planning park rehabilitation and ecological restoration. As a strategy, it is the first step in a continuum of system planning that includes concept and design phases, building infrastructure and improvements, and ongoing operations and management. Next slide, please. The Ribbon of Green defines and applies land management classifications to outline the protection and level of programming appropriate for different locations within the system. Land management classifications allow us to respond to existing conditions, guide future use, protect sensitive areas, and improve disturbed areas. In future planning, the land management classifications will guide design and programming decisions to ensure that we're creating and managing parks in a way that is appropriate to their location within the River Valley system. Next slide, please. Based on the land management classification, the plan provides guidance for the ecological network, including restoration opportunities, and future park programming, including proposed amenities such as washrooms, parking, boat launches, pedestrian bridges, access points, and trailheads. Because this strategic planning work is only based on desktop analysis and there are no field studies completed at this stage, the proposed location of amenities and alignment of trails will need to be revisited and confirmed through more detailed planning in the future. Next slide, please. In terms of our next steps, we'll be working in 2026 on cross-departmental collaboration to begin plan implementation. We'll be initiating work on 2 priority action items: the River Valley Trail Strategy, recently funded through the Fall Supplemental Operating Budget Adjustment process, and a comprehensive management and monitoring framework and state of River Valley reporting to support our understanding of the condition of the system, including ecological health and recreational use. At Council's request, we're also working to clarify guidance for Indigenous engagement in the River Valley ARP, and we'll be returning to Council in June with an update on that work. Finally, we'll be examining resourcing of Ribbon of Green capital projects and other implementation items to potentially advance during the 2027 to 30 budget cycle. Next slide, please. All of this work will help to support the long-term ecological protection and management of the River Valley and Ravine system and ensure that we can continue to enjoy the unique and profound experiences it offers us. Next slide, please. Thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll just have you step back, and we'll hear now from our public speakers. So just as a quick outline for those who haven't been speakers at our meetings before, you'll be heard in panels, which means that each speaker will have 5 minutes to present, one after the other. The clerk will run the official timer in the meeting room, and it will be displayed in the virtual meeting for those of you who may be joining us online. The light will be green for the first 4 minutes, turn yellow when there is 1 minute remaining, and flash red when the 5 minutes is up, and I will then ask you to end your comments. After everyone in your panel has had a chance to present, members of council may ask questions of you or other panel members, so please don't go anywhere after you've shared your thoughts. Please remain in the meeting until all questions have been asked. If you're participating virtually, please just remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can reach out to the Office of the City Clerk using the contact information that was provided in your confirmation of registration. I also just want to set out some expectations to ensure that we have a respectful and constructive conversation. So these expectations apply to both in-person and virtual attendees. So hearing from members of the public is a critical part of Council's process so that we have a full sense of the diversity of opinions that exist in our community. As meeting chair, my role is not to moderate the nature of the content being discussed, but to ensure behaviors support a safe, respectful, and neutral space for my colleagues, city employees, and other members of the public. Disrespectful comments, including those directed at individual staff members or other speakers, profane language or gestures, and behaviors such as shouting, cheering, or clapping will not be tolerated. In addition, use of the raise hand feature, chat, emoticon response, or AI note-taking tools in the virtual meeting are not permitted. I will ask clerk to have any individuals participating in this behavior removed from the meeting. And once removed, you will not be permitted to rejoin the meeting, but you can watch it being streamed live. And with that, I will call our speakers forward and our
Chair Stevenson, we do have another registered speaker, if committee would be so kind as to move to.
Sure. Do we have their name?
It is Christine Kowalchuk from the Edmonton River Valley Conservation Coalition.
Great. Well, I'll move that we hear from Christine. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that's carried. Thanks. Great. I'll now call our speakers forward. If you're here in person, our clerks will guide you to your seats. Okay, so we've got Kyle Scholey, who is here in person. Hi. We have Christine Archibald. Are you joining us online?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Raquel Farrow.
Here, thank you.
All right. Joe Yurkovich, I think I see you here in person. Excellent. Aaron Budnick, I also see you here in person. There you are. Jesse Watson, you're here remote. Calling again for Jesse Watson. Okay, we'll come back to them. Christine Kowalchuk, are you here with us? They may just be taking a moment to get into the meeting. Oh, okay, that's where our public speakers are. Hello. So Speaker Shuley, over to you. You have 5 minutes.
Chair, committee members, councillors, today is a great day. My name is Kyle Scholey, and today I'm very pleased to speak in support of the Ribbon of Green strategy, a visionary plan that will profoundly enrich our city by protecting biodiversity, uplifting Indigenous voices, celebrating heritage, and fostering inclusive access and learning. First, at its core, the Ribbon of Green is about ecological integrity. It safeguards Edmonton's North Saskatchewan River Valley and ravine system and ensures it remains a resilient ecological backbone even as our city population continues to grow. The strategy employs land management classifications like preservation and conservation to buffer sensitive habitats and guide restoration efforts. In doing so, it safeguards wildlife corridors, promotes native biodiversity, and combats ecological fragmentation, all vital elements of long-term environmental health. And to that end, also, thank you for recently funding a trail strategy. Second, the strategy takes meaningful steps towards conciliation by walking with Indigenous communities in stewardship. Developed in partnership with Indigenous nations, the plan sets out to integrate Indigenous knowledge through ceremony, storytelling, and stewardship practices that will guide everything from trail design to ecological monitoring. It's a tangible commitment to respectful Indigenous ways of knowing and to advancing a shared future. Third, and importantly, the Ribbon of Green celebrates our city's diverse cultural and natural heritage. The plan codifies, prioritizes, I'll begin that sentence again. The plan codifies priorities to preserve heritage features, incorporate public art, and cite interpretive signage that tells the stories of both the land and its people. Whether you explore the River Valley ravines or amenity nodes, you will encounter enriched cultural experiences that honor Edmonton's past and inspire our future. It supports and implements the aspirations of the Heritage River designation granted by the provincial and federal governments in 2024. Finally, on access and experiential learning, this plan strikes an admirable balance between protection and inclusion. It envisions a citywide network of trails, primary trailheads, and amenity nodes smartly designed to improve connectivity while protecting fragile ecosystems. Accessible design principles ensure that our youngest learners and seniors alike can engage with nature authentically and safely. Educational components woven into the plan facilitate hands-on experiences, turning the Ribbon of Green into a vibrant outdoor classroom for schools, families, and lifelong learners. In summary, the Ribbon of Green is more than a plan, it's a promise. It's a promise to defend our environment, decolonize our stewardship, honor our heritage, and invite Edmontonians into meaningful access and learning. I strongly urge committee to recommend to Council to endorse this bold, inclusive, and intergenerational strategy and look forward to seeing it come alive across our valley and ravines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to our next speaker now, Christine Archibald. I believe you're online. Please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and members of committee and council. My name is Christine Archibald. I'm the Executive Director of the River Valley Alliance. It's a regional nonprofit working with 6 municipalities, including the City of Edmonton, to complete the Msquitchea-Mesquinau Trail or Beaver Hill Road Trail. This is proposed to be a 100-kilometer contiguous pedestrian trail that spans the North Saskatchewan River Valley across the Edmonton metropolitan region. I'm here today to support the repeal of the 1992 Ribbon of Green Master Plan and therefore the subsequent implementation of the updated Ribbon of Green Strategic Plan. The updated plan reflects how the River Valley is understood today, not as a collection of isolated sites, but as a connected system that balances ecological protection, land stewardship, cultural values, and public access. From the River Valley Alliance's perspective, this is an important and necessary step forward. What I'd like to focus on briefly is how connectivity fits within that system, particularly as the city moves into implementation. From the River Valley Alliance's perspective, regional ecological connectivity is foundational to how the updated Ribbon of Green is meant to function in practice. Connectivity should not be a competing priority. It's part of the implementation logic of the plan itself. A continuous regional trail is one of the tools that allows the city to guide access to appropriate locations, reduce informal or unmanaged use, and protect ecologically sensitive areas, while still supporting public enjoyment of the river valley. In other words, connectivity helps conservation, restoration, and access investments work together as a coherent system rather than in isolation. This is where the Umsquitchie-Meskinau Trail is particularly relevant. The regional trail is already in place across much of Edmonton's river valley and neighboring municipalities. Approximately 75% of the 100 kilometers has been connected through long-standing collaborative efforts. What remains is a 25-kilometer gap in southwest Edmonton. This gap limits system continuity. Continued advancement of the final 25 kilometers of the trail would connect existing protected and managed areas, improve equitable access to the River Valley Trail system, and strengthen the effectiveness of both past and future Ribbon of Green investments. The trail helps define how the Ribbon of Green is experienced. It helps shape how the framework is used over time. In that sense, it functions as practical, enabling infrastructure, linking neighborhoods, destinations, and stewardship efforts in a way that reflects the plan's system-based approach. Importantly, the Umsquitchie-Meskinau Trail has been planned and delivered incrementally over several decades with careful attention to land classification, ecological sensitivity, and appropriate siting. This is about continuing an existing collaboratively planned project. It's not introducing something new or untested. The reason I'm speaking today is timing. Today's agenda item formally positions the updated Ribbon of Green strategic plan as the city's guiding framework moving forward. This is an appropriate moment to reinforce that regional connectivity is foundational to effective implementation. As future capital decisions are considered, particularly within the 2027 to 30 budget cycle, I would encourage committee and council to keep the continued advancement of the final 25 kilometers of the Umsquitchie-Meskinau Trail in mind as key infrastructure project that supports the Ribbon of Green's long-term ecological and stewardship vision as implementation moves forward. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions later.
Thank you very much for joining us. Our next speaker is Raquel Farreau, joining us remotely. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks a lot. I'm glad that I get to follow Christine Archibald because I really agree with her presentation that really all you're being asked to do today is rescind the old Ribbon of Green. But it gives us a chance to start thinking about priorities for the 27 budget. And I share the perspective that the ecologic connectivity and the regional ecologic connectivity is the key principle, the foundational piece of this Ribbon of Green. We need to preserve our river valley as a lifeline in times of climate change and biodiversity loss. And we are sitting on a regionally significant wildlife corridor, and we need to continue to protect that. And I think the principles and the strategic plan within which you're being presented today make complete sense. And I agree with Christine too that as we think about budget, completion of that Beaver Hill Road Trail is key. Only 75% of it is currently completed. So to connect Fort Saskatchewan to Devon, we need dollars for that. And as we think about the 27 budget, I think it's also really important to think about that monitoring that is going to be so key. Without proper monitoring and without proper metrics, we won't know if we're meeting our ecologic goals. Because as Angela Hobson said in her presentation, a lot of this Ribbon of Green strategy still needs to be ground truthed. And so, there's some key budget things that we need to think about going forward into 27. And there's also things that you're possibly going to be hit with that I think you really should not consider at all. Definitely not consider prematurely, not until that trail is completed, not until monitoring is in place. Because it's only with that monitoring that the whole plan, all of the principles and all the strategies will make sense. But there's things that could come up that I think should not be considered and that you should put to bed as quickly as possible. Things like Touch the Water and the Waterfront Promenade. They're going to be very expensive, very distracting, and I think we need to think more strongly about the operational costs going forward for the existing infrastructure. Like right now, there are many stairs. There's a lot of access that's not maintained during the winter because we don't have the capacity to shovel all the stairs and sidewalks. And so some are closed for winter. So if we're going to maintain access, that costs a lot of money. If we're going to maintain what we have, that costs a lot of money. So let's not add gratuitous infrastructure that's going to add cement, impermeable surfaces, that's going to hoop us in times of climate change and biodiversity loss. Let's focus on those key things like finishing the 25% that's left of the Beaver Hill Road Trail. Let's concentrate on properly funding the monitoring, and just, above all, continue to read these documents that Angela Hobson and others have presented to you, and prioritize that wildlife corridor and the ecologic connectivity. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you for joining us. We'll go next to Joe Yurkovich, who's joining us here in person today. Over to you for 5 minutes. Sorry, we'll just pause for a second. We need your microphone on.
Oh.
There we go. Excellent.
Oh, it's a red light. I'm sorry about that. So good morning, Mayor Knack, councillors, and members of administration. I'm presenting today as president of the Edmonton Mountain Bike Alliance, EMBA. Next slide, please. Or could I have my slides, please?
We'll just pause the time. Have we got the slides?
Apologies, Chair Stevenson, but we don't seem to have a presentation.
I did send it at about 4:15 to the city clerk yesterday.
Perhaps we could move to the next speaker until we find your presentation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your understanding. Our next speaker is Aaron Budnick. Have you come up? Thank you for your patience, Speaker Yurkovich. Over to you, Speaker Budnick, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, and thank you for your time. I'm here on behalf of the YEG Bike Coalition, an advocacy group that represents urban and utility cyclists. The Ribbon of Green strategic plan is a strong and thoughtful document. It mostly aligns with city plan and reflects years of work by administration and partners and sets the right overall direction for the River Valley. I'm not here to oppose this plan, but I am here to ask committee to direct admin to strengthen it before it goes to council, to ensure that it consistently delivers the outcomes we have already committed to, like Vision Zero, climate change mitigation, accessibility, enabling a modal shift, affordability, and ensuring a positive experience for residents and visitors. This is about setting a better minimum standard. As written, the plan provides strong vision and values, but it leaves too much discretion in areas where outcomes depend on clarity. This matters because site-specific planning is where trade-offs re-enter. Trade-offs are where safety, accessibility, and climate outcomes often get weakened, and that's how good plans quietly fall short of their goals. I'm not asking for a full rewrite, just a clear minimum standard so that future projects don't need to renegotiate basic expectations around safety, accessibility, and design. I believe that clear standards make engagement easier and more predictable, reduce conflict and relitigation, provide clear and consistent direction to administration, and ensure that projects reliably align with city plan, Vision Zero, and climate goals. The plan rightly recognizes the River Valley as a regional active transportation corridor. People are not just recreating there. They are commuting, making everyday social and recreational trips, running errands, using e-bikes, cargo bikes, scooters, and adaptive devices, walking or rolling with mobility aids, strollers, and sometimes with limited stamina. For many people, especially those with disabilities or mobility constraints, the River Valley is one of the few places where active travel feels possible because grades are often gentler and traffic is lower. But that only works if infrastructure is safe, predictable, and legible. Accessibility must be foundational and not aspirational. People with disabilities, seniors, parents with strollers, and people using mobility aids cannot negotiate fast-moving conflict, cannot react quickly to ambiguous conditions, cannot safely use narrow mixed-use facilities. What may be framed as a shared compromise often becomes an exclusion. If accessibility is a real objective, and it should be, then separation, continuity, and consistency are requirements and not optional enhancements. Designs that work for people with the greatest constraints end up working better for everyone. This is also an opportunity to reward the behavior that the city needs more of. Improving the River Valley rewards people that are already doing what Edmonton needs more residents to do, such as getting around without a car, aging in place, staying active despite injury or disability, and in winter, and reducing congestion and emissions. This is how we achieve our climate goals beyond just environmental protection, support our Vision Zero goals, reduce pressure on roads and traffic congestion, and manage our long-term infrastructure cost. The modal shift doesn't just happen because people are persuaded. It happens when safe, pleasant options are obvious, comfortable, and connected. That's why the plan needs to be clear. There's really nothing objectionable in this plan, but there are some important omissions. First, modal separation. The plan does acknowledge conflict, but it does not require any separation by mode or speed. In a high-volume corridor, especially one with growing micro-mobility use, shared use pathways create predictable but avoidable conflicts. If Vision Zero and accessibility are goals, separation in high-conflict locations cannot be optional. Although I'm here as a cyclist, I also know that we can be fast-moving and unpredictable, and that often makes others feel unsafe and uncomfortable. So we can solve that problem. Second, crossings and continuity. Infrastructure that frequently changes type is difficult for everybody, especially for people with cognitive, visual, or mobility impairments. Continuous, standardized facilities with level crossings where trails meet traffic reduce decision-making burden and predictability. This improves safety for everyone, including drivers. And finally, consistency is a safety feature. Sorry, that was wrong. The plan appropriately discourages vehicle infrastructure, but does not clearly bound it. Without clear limits, access creep and parking creep are likely over time, reducing usable space and increasing conflict, especially for people with mobility concerns. I'd also like to briefly address tourism and Edmonton's brand. For many visitors, the River Valley is the longest and most memorable experience in the city. How people feel when moving through the valley directly shapes how they talk about Edmonton after they've been here. Right now, too many visitors experience narrow paths with unclear expectations, a cyclist passing at speed because there's no, I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go back now to Joe Yurkovich, and I believe we've got your presentation loaded up. Thank you for your patience. We'll turn over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for finding the presentation for me. Sorry that I didn't notice that previously. So let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today regarding repeal of the 1992 Ribbon of Green strategic plan and to comment on the next steps proposed for the replacement plan that's been the subject of a very comprehensive public review. EMBA is in full agreement to the repeal of the old plan, and two of the major reasons for that are listed above, which are number one, that the old plan dealt with only a narrow portion of the river valley, and secondly, cycling was prohibited in all preservation areas within the plan. Next slide, please. As a preliminary comment on behalf of the mountain biking community, I'd like to express our thanks to the project team for listening and considering community feedback throughout the 4 rounds of engagement on the Ribbon of Green. Edmontonians do cherish the opportunity to enjoy nature in an environmentally friendly manner in a variety of ways, including by cycling on the natural surface trails using mountain and fat bikes year-round. So we're very appreciative of the fact that in response to overwhelming public support, the trail-based recreation subcategory has been added to the preservation land management classification to permit access to those trails for mountain bikers, trail runners, hikers, and event organizers. Next slide, please. The Ribbon of Green consultation and more recently the funding of the trail strategy have been the catalyst for EMBA to bring together a number of groups representing the organizers and other users of the river valley that are working together to enhance Edmonton's quality of life and to bring economic benefit to our city through development of amenities and promotion of events in the River Valley. It's not just mountain bikers who have a deep appreciation for the River Valley. Next slide, please. And so EMBA has engaged with other users and organizers interested in access to the River Valley for running, hiking, walking, and active transportation, including the River Valley Alliance, who you've already heard from today. Our group intends to work together, building upon our common interests to broaden our coalition and to advocate for and demonstrate the overwhelming support of our citizenry for environmentally responsible access to the River Valley. While our focus is to ensure that this access continues, all of our organizations place equal value on maintaining the River Valley and ravine system as natural spaces so that future generations of Edmontonians have the same opportunities to enjoy nature in our River Valley as we do today. Next slide, please. Some comments now on attachment 2 to the proposed action plan. It's of fundamental importance that the actions outlined there are carried out with the participation not only of conservation organizations and research institutions as proposed at item A, but that all of our interested active user groups be included from the outset. With broad and balanced community and stakeholder group participation, the trail strategy and proper characterization of trails within the system will support the city's recreation, tourism, and quality of life objectives, while also improving user safety, protecting the environment, minimizing unmanaged trail degradation, and reducing unauthorized trail construction. EMBA's experience with the rigorous oversight processes imposed under our volunteer trail maintenance agreement leads us to agree that the city's River Valley guidelines and best practices require attention. There's too much overlap of responsibilities, and too often a group assigned some responsibility has no knowledge of the scope of the projects they're intended to comment on. And so we receive boilerplate comments that have no relevance. As an example of what EMBA deals with for every proposal we make for more than minor volunteer trail maintenance, our application just to do preliminary route planning for the flow trails of the new Queen Elizabeth Bike Skills Park resulted in review by 8 different city departments who imposed 66 conditions, many of which, again, were completely inapplicable. Please include active users in implementing the action plan. I believe we have a common goal with the city to preserve our River Valley and ravine system as a healthy natural environment able to contribute today and in the future to the health, quality of life, and prosperity of our citizenry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll call again for our online speaker, Speaker Watson. Have they joined? Do we see them online?
Not so far.
Okay. And Speaker Kowalchuk, are you joining us online?
I am. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, over to you for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for letting me speak at the last minute like this. Good morning, members of the Urban Planning Committee and City Council. Edmonton River Valley Conservation Coalition has closely engaged on the Ribbon of Green plan. We appreciate the work the city's ecological planners have done on this document and their implementation of many of our suggestions. We support this document with a few important caveats and hope that you might make a motion to ensure the changes we suggest are made to this document. First of all, the River Valley's significance as a wildlife corridor connecting the mountains with the prairies and beyond should be mentioned in the document's introduction. This is what makes the River Valley so ecologically valuable. Currently, the wildlife corridor is not mentioned until page 19. We agree with Christine Archibald's point that the underlying principle of this plan must be continuity and connectivity, but we see this as applying to the wildlife corridor. No other city has a wildlife corridor running through its heart as Edmonton does. And currently, Edmonton is the main pinch point in the entire river's length. We have a responsibility to the whole watershed to remove these pinch points and to protect the ecological integrity of this corridor. Secondly, and this is something we did bring up in engagement, replace the sentence, Indigenous peoples began occupying the area around the North Saskatchewan River not long after the last ice age ended, with Indigenous peoples have occupied the area around the Saskatchewan River since at least the end of the last ice age. Much recent research indicates that Indigenous peoples have occupied Great Turtle Island for far longer than that, and this is still based on just what is empirically known. Thirdly, in section 2.5.2a, remove the words history of disturbance, as disturbance is not defined and nearly all of the river valley has been disturbed at one time and then restored. Number 4, lands classified as conservation. I'm sorry, I think somebody else's microphone is on. It's so distracting. Lands classified as preservation trail-based recreation should not allow for bikes. When City Council voted to allow bikes in preservation areas in 2021, this was meant to be a temporary change until further research was done. No further research, as far as we know, has been done, so it's poor governance to simply grandfather in this change. Furthermore, in 2021, a literature review on the comparative impacts of bicycles and other uses in natural areas that had been done by the city's ecological planners was not presented by administration to City Council at the meeting in which the vote on allowing bikes occurred. As far as we know, City Council has never seen that literature review. Number 5, lastly, we are concerned that park master plans are included in the ribbon of green without ecological impact assessments being done. Those master plans should be removed, as their inclusion here then leads to an unfounded justification that they should simply be approved. We feel that individual projects should be approved based on careful consideration of environmental impact assessments instead. On that point, I would like to support Rocky Farrow's point that funding is required for monitoring, enforcement, and maintenance of what we already have, as well as restoration of many areas and public education. We cannot afford, as Dr. Farrow said, gratuitous infrastructure like touch the water. Instead, we need to respect the floodplains and the entire wildlife corridor. Doing so is what preserves the beauty and health of the river valley, and it is as a beautiful, healthy place that the river valley best serves all Edmontonians. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll do a final call for Speaker Watson, but otherwise we'll move now to questions of our speakers. Councillor Jans, I see you're on the board.
Thank you. Yeah, if I may go back to guest Budnick a bit, I hear your point about the separation of modes between pedestrians and cyclists. I just wanted to get a sense of how we do that. We've got areas of the valley where there's coexistence. We've got areas where they're a very narrow path and others that are quite wide. Where were you having in mind? Because if we were to be hardline and say something like immediately require, I could see that erasing certain modes, probably some here.
Some areas where the volumes are particularly high, where that would be something that we'd want to see where space allows. Some parts of the river valley, the trails are quite narrow and it just wouldn't be possible to do anything other than a shared use path, so there needs to be a little bit of trade-off on that. But when the volumes are high and there's space, having that modal separation will make for a better experience for everyone.
So what sort of language would you be looking for, or what sort of questions would you like sort of clarified with admin today?
I don't know exactly. We would have to see what the current volumes are and where that would be most appropriate. I don't know what those measures are, but I think that's something that the IIS could probably help us clarify specifically.
Okay, thank you. And if I may ask guest Yurkovic, I had heard that, and again, I don't know if I'm correct or not, but you mentioned, say, for example, the skills park, and I've heard that there were many contradictory asks of different departments, and there seemed to be a question of who at the end of the day was responsible. Is that sort of what you were alluding to? Contradictory advice given by different city departments?
Yeah, the issue is that we end up, as I mentioned, and in that particular example, where we were just looking to do some route planning, the plan went out to 8 different departments. Some of them came back and they talked about things that were extraneous to our projects. When we go and we ask to do, say, a minor trail reroute, it goes to various departments and they come back and they say, well, you have to put up hoarding around every natural tree within 5 meters of your workspace. Well, we're working in the river valley around all the trees, so we can't do that. They talk about laydown areas and they talk about, our equipment, and these are all things that are just boilerplate that come out of a lot of these recommendations. So I think some of the other groups have also expressed this from time to time, that it would be better if we had a more coordinated approach within the city, and we directed one group to have clear authority over it, because now we have a number of groups that are asked to comment, and as I said, a lot of them really don't have any understanding of what particularly EMBA is doing, and that may be the case for others. If I could comment just on the wildlife corridor issue for a second. The biggest pinch point in the wildlife corridor is the Strathcona refinery at the end of Gold Bar Park, and recently they put up a big fence there. So if we're talking about creating a wildlife corridor within the North Saskatchewan River Valley, what the city needs to do is to acquire some of that land at the Strathcona refinery, because if wildlife get to that point of the river valley, they don't have anywhere to go. They can't go and cross the Capilano Bridge and go over to Rental Park. So when people talk about the wildlife corridor and they ignore the Strathcona refinery, it just doesn't make sense to us.
Interesting. Okay. It's not the sort of residential developments like Riverdale?
In respect of the wildlife corridor issue, well, certainly there are some aspects of that apply, but as I said, the biggest pinch point to wildlife being able to move through the North Saskatchewan River Valley is the Strathcona refinery. And as I said, they put up a fence. That there were some trails there that led to the Strathcona Science Park, where a number of cyclists have trails that they use.
So I guess to paraphrase, you support passing the plan as is. It sounds like your concerns are more about the afterwork, like how are we going to acquire the land there? How are we going to execute the trail strategy, et cetera? So
yes, and our concern is that there's a big focus within the plan on conservation, and we do think that there is a balance to the active use, and that's why I put up in my presentation a number of slides that showed how the city itself promotes things like cycling, how we have the ITU World Off-Road Triathlon Championships coming, the fact that Edmonton is touted as the best place in North America for trail running. All of those things contribute to our quality of life and to our prosperity.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Just a couple questions from the speakers. I'll start off with Christine Archibald. You talked a lot about continuing on the trail for the 100 kilometers, continuous trail, and I get that. I think there's been a lot of information shared on the importance of it. I just want to know if your group has done anything about, is there any details on how this would, how does it benefit from, an attraction standpoint to the city, tourism standpoint, any kind of economic perspective on accomplishing that, what that would have for us as we kind of roll into budget meetings in the future?
Sure, thank you for the question. We certainly we work fairly closely with Explore Edmonton. We've got some great relationships with them. Within Explore Edmonton's plan of action is completing the trail system. That's seen as a priority project from their perspective as well, because it does bring that ecotourism benefit to the city and the region. This trail is, if you Google it, it is North America's longest connected river valley pedestrian trail. It actually is a big draw for people who are looking for an ecotourism experience. And as you may well be aware, along the trail, there are a number of already established tourism destinations, such as Fort Edmonds Park, Indigenous Peoples Experience, and many, many more, as well as some 50 plus actual river valley parks that can be visited by tourism as well, or experienced by tourists as well. I think ecotourism is growing in the industry, certainly by international travelers looking for that experience where they can really connect with nature and the environment. And also it's a really great learning opportunity for people to understand why the river valley has been left as pristine as it is and the importance of the eco part of that tourism. I think it's a really good opportunity to educate people on why it's important to value our green spaces and what they bring to our world, not just our region. So definitely that has been explored. I think right now it's just around other trails of that sort of length and variety around the world. They bring in millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars of ecotourism money into the system annually. And I think this trail is the sum of its parts. Yes, there are segments, that are completed that are wonderful to use, but without full completion, we really can't sort of put it out there as, what it actually is. And this is a 100-kilometer connected trail system through 6 municipalities. That's the longest in the world.
Great, thank you. So, I'm hearing correctly, completing that is really a great signal in developing that ecotourism standpoint from the city, and it's a great selling feature. That's correct to sum it up.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, next question to Speaker Raquel Forey. You talked a little bit about metrics and kind of our ecological goals, and I'm just kind of I want to get your sense on, since I'm not really an expert in that field, but what you would recommend as some potential metrics to be added to this.
Well, that's a cool question. Thank you. I mean, as somebody who's closing in on 70, I've seen a lot of baseline shift within our river valley, and I think, younger folk probably don't even appreciate what's already gone and what we could have if we have proper monitoring in place. When I used to walk the trails, I would see evidence of deer browse, in most every stretch, and there's a lot of places where that is gone now. So I would love to see. I mean, I think that Angela Hobson and Agnieszka, the people working on this, are dedicated to coming up with metrics and monitoring. So I'd really leave it to the experts. But I have had conversations about, wouldn't it be nice if we used a metric of seeing evidence of deer browse within every kilometer stretch of the river valley on the north and south sides of the North Saskatchewan. So I think that would be a cool metric, but they may come up with better ones. But I appreciate the question. I think it's an important question. I think answering that question is key.
Great, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions of our speakers, so thank you again all so much for joining us, both in person and online. We're now going to go to questions of our administration. You're, of course, welcome to stay to hear more of the conversation. I'll ask colleagues to sign up with any questions that they have of our staff. Well, I have a few, so happy to kick that off. We heard, just want to follow up on a few of the comments from speakers. So the question around mechanisms for mode separation in our trails, where does that exist? Where does that live as a policy? I assume it's not complete streets. Where do we make those decisions?
Yep, there's actually policy right in section 2.6 of the Ribbon of Green that speaks to separation of trail uses, and it is high-level policy direction, considers things like conflict, safety concerns, potentially speed of the different modes as well. So we have we feel good policy direction already within the Ribbon of Green that'll allow us to do further work on that. And I believe the right place to do that would be through the trail strategy and starting to identify where those potential conflicts are happening.
Okay, wonderful. That's really helpful. And then just on the trail strategy as well, to the previous question around some of the metrics, my understanding is that the funding that we've provided for the trail strategy will allow that baseline data to be collected as well. Is my memory correct?
So the baseline data about the health of the river valley, that's work that would happen through our monitoring framework that we're currently scoping. So that would require different resources. The trail strategy perhaps could help with some, there will be some on the ground work. I'll maybe turn to some of my colleagues with respect to that, but there'll be some on the ground work that'll be done through the trail strategy that could be maybe leveraged for the monitoring framework, but I'll let maybe Angela speak a bit more.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think there's definitely the main opportunity is really through the ecological monitoring and management framework for collection of that baseline ecological data. But certainly through the trail strategy, I think we have opportunity to do further field assessment and to kind of confirm and support that baseline data.
Okay, great. And so my memory, I was just wondering, one of the questions I had reading through the report, do you require direction at this point to bring an unfunded service package forward for some of this additional implementation work, or is that already contemplated to be coming back to council?
Councillor, yes, that is something that we're preparing for our internal deliberations.
Okay.
So no direction needed. That is something that we are working on. How it is considered when the budget is being prepared, I can't comment on that, but we are working on the submission.
Okay, great. You know, one clarification, this comes up, you know, we heard the request for a few amendments and changes to the wording of Ribbon of Green. And something that stood out to me in the report, and I may have misunderstood, but it says the new plan is within the city manager's delegated authority. So city council's formal approval is not required. So can you just remind me of administration's ability to make small refinements, again, to reflect some of the new technical information or new evidence that we're hearing from archaeological and oral evidence, for example, that was raised by the speaker. And then just remind me again, council's role in the ongoing stewarding of the plan.
So, Councillor, because this is a strategy, it doesn't require council approval. The previous strategy was approved as part of provincial funding requirements and required council approval at that time, but because this is a strategy, it is within administrative purview. Certainly we can make some of those wording changes that can happen through our administrative processes. That's fine.
Okay, and just in terms of, again, we wouldn't necessarily anticipate administration making wholesale changes, radically changing direction through this framework, because that, I assume, would start to become in conflict with city plan or other higher order policies, including the ARP, River Valley ARP.
That's correct. These two plans, the Ribbon of Green and the ARP, were co-developed, so there is really good alignment between the two. So I would agree we wouldn't want to make large changes to it at this point. It would create potentially some frictions, but some wording changes that committee or council would like to recommend, certainly administration can consider those.
Okay.
Can I also comment as well that if in the future, in the next several years or longer, more substantive changes are needed that would be viewed not just minor, those are things we would bring to council. Even though it is within administration's purview, we would bring those and give light to council and community.
Great, really appreciate that. And I'm going to push the boundaries as chair, but Ms. Petrin, just heard the comment around some of the boilerplate conditions. Is that something your team can take away in terms of their review processes?
Yes, yeah, we can take that away.
Great, thank you so much. Councillor Jans, over to you.
Thank you so much. I think I've surveyed a number of folks and received a lot of feedback about this. And generally what I've heard from everyone is that even the critics are saying this is roughly right, that you should pass it today, and then from there we need to have the next conversations around the funding and the next steps, the monitoring, etc. Is that kind of fair to say that this really is the jumping off point? This really is the vision, and then from here everything else does kind of depend on the funding for the implementation. Is that kind of a fair synopsis here? Passing this plan today will not cause some dramatic, like closure of a golf course or some cessation of a use or something?
That's correct. Really, with the completion of the ARP, the approval, sorry, of the ARP and the completion of the Ribbon of Green, this gives administration the direction we need to begin the implementation processes and things that are outlined in the action plan, specifically in the attachment to the report. So, yeah, we're quite happy and pleased with where the plans sit, and we feel it provides all the direction we need at this point for implementation.
And do I recall council already passed the trail strategy, funding for the trail strategy? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so that part is en route. There's the question, I guess, of the funding for the monitoring and some of those other pieces. What would that look like, and on what timeline?
So we would bring those forward as part of unfunded service packages for council's consideration, but as Kent said, we are still deliberating on those internally.
I was talking to a couple of stakeholders about really how the River Valley is more comparable to something like our national parks, based on visitors, uses, needs, considerations, than sort of other park spaces in other areas. And when I was trying to look into what they do, this idea of this visitor use management framework approach keeps coming up. Is that something that's considered or integrated into the plan, or how do we kind of think about that?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that I think we'll look to apply through the River Valley Trail Strategy. And I know the city is also working on a visitor experience framework, which is also applying that sort of high-level direction. So I think that is a really important sort of movement, and it's something that we can take away as we move into implementation.
Yeah, and maybe by way of offering, maybe, I don't know if closure, clarity is the word here, but there had been talk about a national park. My understanding is that is not underway right now, may have even been kiboshed by the province of Alberta. Just wanted to get an understanding of where that ties into this Ribbon of Green plan, if at all.
So it's complementary if it was to proceed. The formal status of the National Urban Park exploration is it's still on pause. So it hasn't been canceled. We are viewing and thinking about a council update this spring. Not much progress, but looking at provincial legislation that was introduced and how it impacts the National Urban Park, knowing that Parks Canada, their window to have designation is this spring. So, but they are talking about continuing on a future program. So there's some outstanding questions that still need to be resolved. It's still a thing or a possibility, but it is substantially on pause.
Mm-hmm. So finally, I guess, would it be fair to say that any use in the valley reasonably occurring within the last 12 months would be allowed to continue with the passage of this plan? That this is kind of a go for it from here, that we're not going to, passing this today, we won't see significant change one way or the other?
I would say that's correct, yes.
And really from here, the next steps in terms of changes really just depends on what we're able to fund in our budget.
That's right.
So words on a paper until we get the cash. Okay. All right. I have nothing further and I don't need to speak to it. Thank you. I'll support.
Thanks, Councillor Jans. Councillor Paquette?
Oh, thank you very much. So just a quick few questions here. I'm a little bit curious about how we enforce some of these things without an attached budget. And if anyone wants to speak to that. Like, I'm talking about what happens in the River Valley, and we may have some ideas about protections and things like that, but without enough staff to actually monitor that, it's kind of aspirational without being able to observe. Thoughts?
So, I mean, I guess I can speak from a trails perspective. I think really, again, through the River Valley Trail Strategy, we have some pretty important opportunities to continue to build our relationships with community partners and to lean into education and kind of a shared understanding and clarity of what the approved trail network is. I think that's going to be really important work. I think that's where a lot of enforcement issues have come up in the past. So that's something that we're really looking to get shared clarity on. Are there? Yeah, I guess I would
Okay.
offer that as
well,
a
you
starting
understand
place.
what I mean. Like, we know that there are trails being carved in that aren't, no one's actually happy about them. Like EMBA isn't happy about it. We're not happy about it. But
Yeah.
it appears we're not actually monitoring that, right? Until it's already done.
And so certainly enforcement is a challenge in that regard, but again, through the trail strategy, we have an opportunity to come together with community partners and to identify an approved trail network, and then to work with our community partners on education and community involvement.
I think we should probably have conversations in the future about right-sizing what that looks like for capacity. Okay, so next, just, one of the things that wasn't raised but was on my mind is, along those lines, we might be saying to people, no, you can't cycle there, you can't do this there, you can't do that there, but then 6 months later, we're like, yeah, but a big utility project can go in there. And just how you would manage that perspective among the community about, like, well, why do they get this and we don't? And I understand it would be because it's deemed essential need, but do we have a communication plan for that?
Sorry, Councillor, do you mean where the Ribbon of Green maybe a request might come in that would be different from what the Ribbon of Green is calling for in terms of utility access? Sorry, maybe you can clarify.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking in the future, because things always pop up. And what I don't like is when the city is completely unprepared for things that we're very obviously coming.
Councillor, I think that's good feedback for us to consider when projects are happening, to think about how we communicate, who we communicate, and when we communicate. So we'll take that away.
Okay, and then in the report, it has like some additional considerations we may want to consider. And those are the climate impact considerations and so forth in the report here. And I'm just wondering what the mechanism is for those considerations to occur. Or is it just, think about that?
Certainly those can happen through the implementation pieces of work, Councillor. So even thinking about the trail strategy, or as we align even with the wildfire strategy that's coming forward, we're thinking about all those things as part of the implementation pieces, I would say.
Okay. All right, so the intention in the report was just to say we haven't missed that we will have to think about this. Okay, then you don't need at present anything from council, but would any of those considerations come before council in the future?
That's a good observation, Councillor. There could be future decision points for council. The Climate Planning and Development Action Plan that council approved last year does have some of the actions that might have start to approach regulatory, how we handle setbacks and how we handle buffers and perhaps things like that. And so there could be future decisions that we bring forward to council to consider that are more regulatory, along with the rationale around the climate considerations.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Yeah, good work on revising, something that's from 1990 and 1992 and providing it. And I appreciate all the work that went into this. I was trying to find a report, but can you give me a little more detail on kind of the engagement that happened to get to this level, both from the community perspective and Indigenous groups as well?
Yeah, so we engaged with the public and with Indigenous nations and communities in all 4 phases of the project. So everything from surveys to in-person workshops where we could. It was also sort of straddling COVID a bit, so we had a lot of online engagement. Pop-ups in the River Valley. We received, I think, around 10,000 responses from Edmontonians, and we engaged 23 of the 32 Indigenous nations and communities that have cultural and historical connections to the River Valley lands. So yeah, we had a lot of really important conversations. We've attached the What We Heard reports for the 4 phases of engagement, as well as our What We Did report. Those are all referenced in the report. So
yeah, pretty thorough and comprehensive, I would say. And I guess it kind of leads to sort of Councillor Jan's and Councillor Stevenson's comments. I guess on future engagement, what we're hearing is pretty much, there's a lot of alignment in repealing this old plan and going to the new one. There's just a few kind of details when you get into it. And I guess when that gets kind of the implementation stage, is that when, additional feedback can happen to make some kind of tweaks or adjustments, or at least take on those opinions?
yeah, absolutely. So I think some of those more minor suggested changes we can take back and make internally, but certainly through our upcoming implementation action items, like the River Valley Trail Strategy, like the Ecological Monitoring and Management Framework, community input is going to be really critical to both of those pieces of work. We know there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience within the community that can help us to inform both of those pieces of work, as well as other implementation items. So yeah, ongoing engagement will be critical.
Okay, so some of the people we heard today would encourage them to kind of, or maybe admin can reach out to them to try to figure out how some of those suggestions can be incorporated or looked at moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, I'm not seeing any further questions on the board. I wonder, I know there's a subsequent motion. I'm wondering if one of my colleagues would like to put the main motion on the floor.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. So we are moving to recommend to Council that the previous plan be rescinded. Did anybody have any questions or comments or wish to speak to this motion? Not seeing anyone. Oh, that's okay. Councillor Paquette. To speak.
Thank you. So I just want to acknowledge the speakers who came out today. Thank you for your input. It really lent food for thought for me anyway. And to administration, thank you for your hard work in developing this and working with so many different partners and with the Indigenous community to build this. This is, this is really great. You know, I once upon a time sat on the RVA as a council appointee, and to see this work progressing in a really thoughtful and measured way is really nice. But of course, we always want to have those guardrails on how we're moving forward with the River Valley. And I do have a few concerns, but we'll take those up in conversation as we go on. But otherwise, really appreciate everything that everyone has done to date, because this is not easy work. And I just urge my colleagues to go ahead and support, which I think I probably don't have to do.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Jans, any closing comments?
Nope.
Okay, please vote.
Yep.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that is carried unanimously. Councillor Paquette, I believe you have a subsequent motion you'd like to put on behalf of Councillor Salvador?
That's correct. Yeah, Councillor Salvador did a lot of work on this, and in conversation, I thought, I agree with this so much, I'd like to make the subsequent, because she's not able to, as she's not sitting on this committee. So it is as following: that administration provide a report on completing the remaining 25 kilometers of the Southwest River Valley Trail identified by the River Valley Alliance Plan of Action, including, and it just hopped up on me. Pardon me. Including a summary of project history, progress, and alignment with City Plan and the Ribbon of Green Strategic Plan, a high-level capital and operating capital and operating requirements, including options for phased or incremental delivery scenarios, potential partnership and funding arrangements, including opportunities to leverage provincial and federal funding, and key opportunities, constraints, and options to advance project completion due June 2026, but I don't know where, maybe back to this committee or we'll check in with the clerks.
Back to this committee.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this? Not seeing any. So yeah, anyone to speak? I might offer a few comments. Just appreciate Councillor Salvador working to bring this forward and the work of the River Valley Alliance. I think having a sense of what it will take to close those last few kilometers will be a great conversation. Councillor Paquette, anything to close?
Yep, just echo the thought. This was great work from Councillor Salvador, and it is probably a nicely elegant, if I am anticipating the report correctly, an elegant solution to how we can complete the last 25 kilometers here in a way that is beneficial and works for all Edmontonians and our partners. So thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that's carried. Thank you. That concludes item 7.1, our first of the day. And up next, we have item 7.2, Kettle Lakes Neighborhood Structure Plan, Council Authorization. So we'll start with a presentation from administration as we get the delegation settled. And then we'll hear from our public speakers. over to you when you're ready.
Good morning, councillors. Andrew McCullen, the Senior Planner for the South Unit, will give the overview of the presentation for this authorization.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Located in the developing area of Dakota in southeast Edmonton, the plan area is approximately 517 hectares in size. The boundaries of the new neighborhood would be Ellerslie Road Southwest, Meridian Street Southwest, 41st Avenue Southwest, and 17th Street Southwest. Next slide, please. The planning and development process starts with the city's strategic plans, more specifically, the city plan. Under the city plan, council's authorization is required prior to the preparation of any new statutory plan. This is where we are today. The Dakota Area Structure Plan is in effect for this area and anticipates 5 NSPs to guide growth. So far, Alces and Meltwater are approved NSPs, and Snowberry NSP has been authorized and is currently being drafted. Kettle Lakes is the next logical neighborhood that has sufficient landowner participation at this time. It represents a natural extension of development from Snowberry and Alces and is needed to provide service connections for the future Dakota NSP. Further down the development continuum, if the NSP is adopted, it will then inform future rezonings and subdivisions within the neighborhood. The future NSP is required to align with city standards for planning new communities, which include 12 outcomes such as ensuring neighborhoods are connected, cost-effective, safe, secure, unique, inviting, inclusive, flexible, and adaptable. Broadly speaking, the plan will be required to designate the type and location of land uses, define a design vision, establish a mobility network, identify the location, size, and configuration of schools, parks, open space systems, and natural areas, and provide general servicing schemes and a staging pattern for development. A new neighborhood structure plan for this area supports the city plan by helping to accommodate an additional 1 million people within Edmonton's existing boundaries, and contributes to the big city move, a community of communities, by providing a variety of land uses that will allow residents to meet their daily needs within a 15-minute walk, bike, or transit ride from where they live. Next slide, please. Administration supports the authorization to prepare the Kettle Lakes NSP. Should council provide authorization, the applicant will prepare the NSP and submit an application. Administration will then undertake the typical process for a land use change involving a new plan, which includes technical review, public engagement, ensuring alignment with policy, and development of an integrated infrastructure management plan to provide council with information about the infrastructure required for the development and an overview of forecasted cost implications and property revenues generated. Once administration has completed its analysis of the application and conducted public engagement, a bylaw and planning report will be brought to a public hearing. Edmontonians will have the opportunity to provide feedback directly to council should they wish to speak at the public hearing, and council will ultimately decide whether the NSP is adopted. Next slide, please. Thank you. We would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll shift now to our public speakers. So we have Gazelle Lotfi, Scott Cole, Ali Shillington, and Peter Tsoukalas. Great. Come on up. Happy for you to go in the order that you prefer.
Chair Stevenson, the speakers are here for questions only.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Well, I'll ask my colleagues if you have any questions to please sign up. I know I have a few, but happy to defer to others. All right. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing this forward. I wanted to understand, what metrics, what are the dynamics happening right now that make you determine this is the right time to move forward with this work?
Thank you, Chair Stevenson. I think really we're looking at unlocking the next piece of the Southeast. The Alces neighborhood that Kentiro has been largely involved in has moved very, very quickly. We're seeing the homes drive up quite quickly at quite a rapid pace, and Kettle Lakes is the next contiguous step in that and also helps aid the completion of Ellerslie Road and the continuation of 17th Street.
Okay, so when you're looking, so you referenced Alsace. What about Meltwater and Silbury? What's the development completion on Meltwater right now? Like how much development has happened?
I would defer to administration on that. We and Brookfield don't actually own lands within the meltwater areas, so I wouldn't be totally sure.
Okay. And when you prepared your submission to administration, what information did you include with that package? I know we're in a bit of flux with the NSP terms of reference, but just wondering what was the supporting documentation you provided?
So we don't provide a big submission to council as part of the authorization. We essentially submit a letter that asks for us to move towards authorization. So we don't undertake any technical studies or land planning until we get authorization from council to proceed. So that's where we're at today, is we're looking for the okay to start all that detailed work to move forward. I would just also say this takes a lot of time. Alsace is moving quickly, Meltwater is moving quickly. So it's not like we're breaking ground tomorrow. We need some time to begin the planning to really get Kettle Lakes right.
Yeah, well, and that's an interesting question. What is your typical timeline, sort of from initiating a statutory plan and then shovels in the ground and then roofs?
I think it varies greatly. I think 2 to 3 to 4 years. It depends how quickly it moves, what types of environmental items we're dealing with, which we know in Kettle Lakes is a lot of wetlands. It's going to take a long time to get some of those approvals. Peter, I don't know if you have anything to add, but it's not 1 year and done. This is the first step of many years in a planning process to become ready for development.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here today. I see some other questions from colleagues, so don't go away. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this forward. I appreciate we're still in the early stages on it, but I think kind of just from an overall perspective, I don't know how much detail you can give me. What does the master vision of this neighborhood look like in the future? We talk 5-10 years down the road. And then the second question is how does that differ to any other developments that are already happening, or is it going to be a mirror of something that's already there? I don't know if you guys have or want to share that kind of vision, but I would like that context, please.
Yeah, from a Kenturio perspective, this is really step one. So we haven't given a ton of thought around branding, theming, community. I know that holistically we will be largely in alignment with the Dakota ASP that gives us the direction for the NSP. We know that there's a lot of natural features in the area, so really connecting and celebrating those wetlands and green spaces within the context of the Emerald of Green policy as well. But really until we start the land use and really detailed design, we won't know exactly, the branding, the theming, but we look to create complete communities. We do know the ASP dictates the density of this plan at 35. We'll be exceeding that by submitting an NSP that's 45 units.
Okay, so fair to say it's maybe similar to some other developments, but a little bit unique. And say I'm just trying to get to the question of as we build out new neighborhoods and communities, what makes them different? What do we learned from ones that we've done in the past, and how do we kind of move that forward when we partner with the developer on this? So that's just where I'm trying to get on the context before we take this next step.
Yeah, I think we're continuing to learn. We learn with every neighborhood. We learn with every community that's existing. For example, Alsace, we had tons of feedback from our residents in Charlesworth that helped devise and give us feedback on what Alsace should look like. So I think we always learn and grow. I think what we're learning now is that we need to be at a higher density point when we start these plans. So I think that'll be part one. And then really celebrating and connecting with the Emerald of Green from a larger policy perspective will make this area unique.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Hi, thank you. So you've talked about the wetlands and everything there, and I'm just wondering, it is close to the Beaver Hills biosphere. Is none of this land is protected under that biosphere, right? That's a little bit more to the east in Strathcona County.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, but so I'm just wondering, with the amount of wetlands that are there, and you're talking about high density, are those wetlands at risk?
We have to follow what's largely been approved within the Dakota ASP and within the Emerald Lake policy. Many of those wetland features are also crown claimed by the province, so those have to be retained. So we'll work with administration, again, very early stages. We don't have any of the technical data telling us exactly where we need to go yet, but any of those crown claim wetlands need to and will be retained.
Okay, and then so the actual developable land then, in order to, what is that, 45 units, I think you said?
Yes.
Are we looking more high rises or like, are they gonna, like, what is the intent? Is it single family that you're looking at, or
So
is?
there'll be a mixture of density throughout the neighborhood to hit that 45. It won't be dissimilar to the Kendall plan that council saw last term. So there'll be a mixture. There'll be single family, there'll be townhomes, there'll be semi-detached housing, some high-rise sites definitely we need to in order to hit that 45, but also multi-unit housing as well.
Okay. Thank you. And then you talked about like the underground work that's done along Ellerslie Road that Cantero's already done for Alsace. And so that work then will continue out further east to Meridian Street?
Yep.
On Ellerslie? Okay.
Yep. Over time.
Okay. And then would that tie into possibly anything from Strathcona County?
I think I'll defer to admin on that, but I assume Strathcona County would be circulated on the NSP and we would work with them to determine any requirements they have.
Okay, because I think I just got something circulated from Strathcona County just before Christmas about, and it's up in my office, I didn't check it, along Township Road 514. So I was just wondering, they were doing some rezoning in that area as well.
Yeah, we haven't engaged with them because that would be part of the formal process, but we're always happy to work with our partners.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you. Oh, I do have one more, sorry. So I know that the details in that are yet to come. I think you'll also be providing sort of those cost estimates in that of what the city's ongoing operational costs would end up being, or working with the city to help develop that?
I will defer that to administration because the current terms of reference, we did an IIMP at the ASP level. We're happy to work with administration to refine that to be more accurate with what we're showing in the NSP, but admin is probably the better to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think those are all the questions that we have of you for now. Thank you again so much for being here this morning. Okay, I'll ask my colleagues now. We'll shift to questions of our administration. If you'd like to click on with your questions. We will go to Councillor Wright.
Okay, question. Those details, I think it was outlined in the report too, that you're talking about the operational costs, and that will all be provided so that we know?
Yes, that will be part of developing the plan and bringing it to council.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I had a few questions. So I know right now we're reviewing our NSP terms of reference. Is that correct?
Councillor, we have a new terms of reference that we'll be using with this development of this plan, as well as Snowberry, which was previously authorized.
Okay, what do the new terms of reference speak about in the authorization process? So just for context, our previous terms of reference had section 2.5, authorization process and integrated infrastructure management planning. And it had sort of 5 criteria, 5 data points that administration would look at prior to bringing forward authorizations to council. So wondering what the new terms of reference speak to for authorization.
So with the new terms of reference, we'll be looking into developing those details with the development of the plan. It is important to note that we do have an ASP that hasn't been approved. It did have an IMP done with that. So really at the beginning of this process, any information we would have would really just be extrapolating from that ASP. But through the development of the NSP, we'll refine that. There's obviously going to be some changes. We talked about different densities and that kind of stuff. So those will be reflected in an updated IMP that will be accompanying the NSP.
Okay, but then if we step back, what criteria do we have for the authorization of an ASP?
So right now, all of the developing areas have area structure plans on it. Any new area outside the developing area, which is the future growth area, is subject to substantial completion. So there is a little bit different rule set in terms of when we look towards a new area structure plan. That area structure plan really sets that direction and vision of these plan areas. As mentioned by Andrew, there's the high-level green network, the road network, the land use network, which guides that NSP in terms of where it wants to be. And with that, there's the inclusion of new policy between the old neighborhood or structure plan terms of reference, which was, I think, 2014, 2010. We've had a new city plan, which helps guide and where and how we want to plan these areas as well.
Okay, well, I guess I'm left just wondering what the purpose of the authorization is.
The main purpose would be that we're seeing the ASP. The ASP has direction to develop the neighborhoods, and it's required in order for that Kettle Lakes NSP to be developed. You know, Kettle Lakes is an interesting location because it naturally extends both from Alice's and Snowberry. So we think it's a good idea to get authorization to develop the plan at this point. And, you know, it's better to have a plan in place, I think. Like it was mentioned, there's a lot of development pressure. We expect 2026 to be a lot of activity in Alice's and Meltwater, those areas. So this is the next logical neighborhood.
So, Councillor, if I may, I think what you're getting at is we're here today to seek authorization. There isn't a whole lot of information for you to base that decision on in terms of trigger points. What I would say there is because there is that difference between a area structure plan and that next level NSP, and then how we dovetail that into the city plan in terms of developing area and future growth area. So there is a division there for sure. And what I would say the main purpose here is to check in to see what are admin's expectations in terms of the development of the plan and how does it reflect new policy context. So right now we have a ASP that suggests the density should be 33 dwellings a hectare or something around that. There's new direction out there either from the now defunct EMRB or just expectations in general of council and administration that density comes in higher. So I think that this is a place where we can confirm that and that this is still a valid direction that we want to take or additional pieces that may interest council right now.
Okay, so the opportunity would be for us to say, so noted here that the minimum density would be a target of 45 dwellings, so that's a change. Again, you know, the age of the ASP, did it include our bike plan, all of those considerations?
Those are all things that are going to have to be looked at. There have been updates to a lot of those plans and policies since the ASP was developed. So we anticipate that the development of the NSP will also lead to amendments to the ASP as well. So we'll be looking to implement anything that's changed. Those can be technical standards as well. We know there's some things that have changed there. So we have new complete streets and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be looking to have the new NSP reflect all those new things.
Okay, but again, that's not really set out in the report in terms of what that work that administration will be doing. Maybe I'll just leave it there. I know that's another hanging question, but I'll move to Councillor Jans.
Yeah, it's sort of, and I'm kind of appreciate my colleague raising these concerns as well too. Like I'm looking at the bullets under 2.5 about like I hear we're sort of a density metric is being raised, but there seems to be a number of other. We'll get to that considerations from administration before we're sort of being asked to approve this, and then a number of other pieces will come forward. But it seems to me, why don't we just do that work and bring it all together as one body? Isn't if that makes sense.
I think it's a good reflection in terms of where we are with the older terms of reference that is still posted. And then as we advance through different policy timelines with new city plans, and then an area structure plan that's been approved in this area. So there is some interplay there that through the new terms of reference we're looking to clean up in terms of how that looks and how it comes forward to committee and council in terms of authorization and what the expectation is through these meetings.
I think it would So if we were to refer this back, I think getting that further data and analysis, including, the Councillor Wright touched on the environmental impacts, there's questions around transit and active transportation cited sort of in the report as a consideration. I don't see anything about the availability and timing of supportive city infrastructure, and I'm not sure if that's limited just to the roadways, but also what about future plans for fire halls, libraries, all those other costs. It just seemed, I guess maybe I can ask the chair on process, but it seems to me like if we vote it down, it's done. But if we refer it back, there's a chance to get all of this information at least in one report, and then we can have a full costing, because I'm really worried about approving today and then seeing shift later on.
Councillor Jans, a lot of that work has been done as part of the new terms of reference. We've anticipated that you would be looking for that kind of information. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get that new terms of reference online. But I guess we're asking you to trust that that kind of information is being looked at and will be gathered throughout this process as well. So it's something that we were aware of. We've gone back and we've revised the terms of reference. I think when you would see it, you would say, yes, that kind of information, complete streets, fire halls, the costs, the overall costs of growth. We've gone and looked at it in a much finer tooth comb, and you will see that. So that is coming.
So, Council, just to add, just in terms of understand, there's the suite of information required under the terms of reference. Right now, where we are, we have an ASP that outlines that general network. It also provides that costing analysis for that entire ASP area. Without
which is the Decoteau ASP,
which is the
right?
Decoteau ASP.
That's already.
Yeah. So the green network is outlined, largely where and how the wetlands and the various different green systems are going to interplay are outlined within it. In general, their transit stations are outlined. We don't have fire station data, but this is information that comes at the neighborhood structure plan level. Without actually undertaking a plan, we can't do that analysis of where fire halls are going to be, because those are all based off of the road networks.
So what's the point of the terms of reference?
So terms of reference, it sets out a number of things, and we realized that there is some problem points with it between that area structure plan, the NSP level planning, new direction in terms of city plan, as well as a number of new policies and frameworks that we need to incorporate into the NSP's preparation. We can't give you any detailed analysis around costing if we don't have a land use mix, if we don't have the general networks, the green and the roads set out, which is that NSP level planning of detail.
So how long will it take to get the terms of reference?
The terms of reference is ready.
The terms of reference doesn't tell you the information. It outlines what's required in the preparation of these plans. So through...
Sorry, maybe I'm confused. Yeah. I thought I was hearing from our colleague that there's a bit of chicken and egg here, that like we're not done this, so that's not included yet?
The terms of reference is an overall document that guides the preparation of plans within it. It doesn't give you specific information as to what's in that plan. It's an outline that we require when plan making is undertaken. Without undertaking the plan, we don't know the details within it.
Okay, I'm out of time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, thank you. So my understanding is this step is okay, here's sort of our broad outline. The next step is now we're going to get into the details. Is that correct? Yeah. And so the questions, the good questions that the colleagues have right now, that is the discussion we have in the next stage as we develop the area structure plan. Is that right?
The neighborhood structure plan. Correct.
Neighborhood structure plan. Yeah. Okay. So I guess since we're on the topic, and I'd like to keep it brief, but when we're talking about sort of those developer responsibilities or expectations that it sounds like maybe some on council would like to adjust, we should be cognizant of the fact that every front load of infrastructure means an additional cost on housing, which impacts affordability. Yeah?
What I would say that there is only one payer, whether it comes out of A pocket or B pocket. It's a timing question and a direct transparency question. those are all very worthy conversations to have in terms of where we want to go as a city and how we want to fund these neighborhoods. In terms of this authorization process itself, I would say it's removed from that.
Yeah, and I agree. Just front-loading, I guess, some expectations on why we're not having that conversation just yet, because you can look toward Calgary and see what they've done, but this is not the moment for that conversation. We just simply don't have the information in front of us right now to have an informed conversation on what level council might be interested in pursuing. Is that correct?
Correct, and there's some complexities here as well, because we do have a plan, an area structure plan in place for this area, so those expectations are already built in terms of how it's going to be developed. Obviously, that can be changed and modified as we've discussed in terms of how we go forward. It's a little bit different than, say, south of 41st Avenue in terms of what may that look like in the future if it comes. So just to be clear, there are maybe two sets of playing fields that we're dealing with right now in terms of that conversation around who pays for what.
Yeah, and so for today, it's just essentially saying, okay, the high-level stuff looks okay, but it's understood, I think, very clearly, but we want to have some deeper conversations in the next stage.
Correct.
That's clear. Yeah, okay, great, thanks. No questions.
Thank you. I'll come around for a second round. So I think maybe where I'm struggling is, every step we take in the planning process gets us. It comes with a lot of additional investment. So I think what I'm generally hearing from administration is that all the analysis that's going to be done is going to happen at the NSP stage, but by the time the NSP comes back to us, countless hours, dollars have been spent on that, correct?
There's a significant investment to bring forth an NSP. What I would say is that it's nested under the area structure plan, which has a lot of that high-level analysis around the area as a whole in terms of the infrastructure management plan and the networks that are there to support the growth of the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I think the ASP, absolutely provides that sort of physical planning. What I feel is really missing, and I think we heard it this morning from our speakers. So we have two other neighborhoods one that has an approved NSP. So Alsace, Meltwater have approved NSPs. Snowberry is being prepared right now. I've heard from our speakers that Alsace is moving very quickly, but I have no line of sight on Meltwater, no line of sight on Snowberry. And I think the challenge and sort of why we've tried to adopt a growth management framework is to avoid numerous partially complete neighborhoods that still require full city services, but aren't providing us with the tax revenue to make it serviceable, to make us be able to afford that. And so I understand substantial completion is a very specific piece around our future growth area, but can you help me understand how we're thinking about growth management in our existing ASP areas?
For sure. So in general, most of our policies and guidelines and regulations look to discourage leapfrog development, whether it's in a planned area or an unplanned area. So the servicing and the general progression of servicing in these neighborhoods is important, so that we're not creating conditions where we have to extend either road networks or pipeline networks to service these. So with the advancement and the progression of the Dakota ASP as a whole, from LC's, Meltwater, Snowberry's just being prepared, so there's no development there happening. And then the general progression of servicing in this area is I would say it's both a north to south as well as a west to east progression.
And so do we have data on the progression of that servicing?
So the servicing scheme is outlined in the ASP.
But I mean like actual implementation of that.
So through the planning development process, we have that general progression of it, and we do have stats in terms of where LC's and Meltwater are. I'll just look to Andrew to fill you in.
Okay, and that's, I mean, I think that's the data and information that I really want to be seeing, so that, again, we just see that that analysis has been done. You know, if the pipes and roads are built right up to the northern boundary of Kettle Lakes, that, you know, that makes absolute sense. But again, is it also relying on a collector connection through meltwater, and where are we at on that, for example?
So in terms of lining everything up, I would say at the NSP stage, it's very difficult to say wait for the other NSP to be at its boundary. There is a lot of lead time in these planning frameworks, like
Absolutely.
there's 5+ years from planning to dirt moving. So
Absolutely,
it's a
but
moving
do we
target.
have that forecast in terms of when meltwater will be at the border? Because I totally agree. If the information comes back, meltwater is 5 years away from the boundary, then yeah, you know, I think moving forward with planning at this stage makes a ton of sense. If the analysis comes back and it's 10 years away, you know, then I'm a bit more skeptical.
So what I would say is that our policy framework doesn't require that right now in terms of the authorization of the NSP. It does require that as it moves forward in the substantial completion conversation for the future growth area. This area is already planned through an area structure plan, so it's expected to continue its growth and maintain that progression. Through the various checks and balances in the development process, it doesn't benefit either the developer or the city to extend those pipes or those networks beyond because of the cost associated with it, because there is that negative impact in terms of bringing that infrastructure online to the developer, because ultimately they're responsible to finance and build it. It requires that investment, which sort of acts as a natural break in terms of trying to leapfrog.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that information. Councillor Jans.
Thank you. So I'm missing an attachment. I've got a very thin report with a couple bullets and 2 maps and a presentation. And when I look at the NSP requirement here under 2.5, it's saying before we do the NSP, we're required to have, and it lists the 5 bullets of those pieces, and I don't feel like I have those pieces. And then I'm hearing the risks highlighted by my colleague, and I guess what I'm wondering is how long would it take administration if we refer this back to come up with a response to the data and analysis required in the terms of reference, or those pieces there? Because what I worry about is that we've already studied that Decoteau will lose the city money. It's going to mean a tax increase. It's not going to pay for itself. What I hear us today debating is how much of a tax increase are we willing to shoulder? And is it going to be a smaller one or a larger one? And I don't feel like we have the information here to be able to make that decision about what tax increase we're willing to accept. So do we need 6 weeks? Do we need 6 months? Is this?
So in terms of the requirements under 2.5, we see that as being fulfilled through the area structure plan and the IMP that was prepared for the area, as well as the general networking and the physical planning that's undertaken in the ASP. In order to get that detail for an NSP level and size, the detailed planning needs to be required to support that analysis. We don't know the general road networks within here yet because that planning hasn't been done. We know the general collectors and the arterials, but the locals also add to that. So there's additional planning work that needs to get to that level of detail in terms of costing out and providing that revenue and cost projection to council.
I'm sorry if I may, it seems like we've met the criteria of the NSP, the ASP was approved. But it looks like where the disconnect I feel is, so we met the first checkpoint, we have that information, but we don't have the information to meet the threshold to approve an NSP.
So you're not approving an NSP right now, you're authorizing the planning of it. The approval comes back to you through the statutory planning process and city council public hearing. That is when you'll see the full suite of information.
Even to authorize the preparation of an NSP, it looks like we haven't met the criteria yet. Like we don't have the information here.
It's not possible to have the information here because in order to have the information, you need the detailed planning of the neighborhood structure plan. What we're saying in terms of moving forward of 2.5 is that the ASP provides that general framework which will be refined in the NSP planning stages with all of the supporting technical documents and the analysis that is required to make your decision of the approval. Like, there is still a significant step in this process that comes back to council for full council approval of the plan.
And I think, so what, if I hear you correctly, you're saying in order to answer the questions of the NSP, you need to approve the plan of the NSP. Is that?
You need to approve.
You need to approve the planning of the ASP.
Planning, correct.
Right. But the problem is, in order to start the planning, there's a huge outlay of money and work and effort and everything that, in a sense, the sunk costs of that are already very significant to start that planning.
To create the plan, which is developer driven, and they pay for the plan making, they need this authorization. It's a significant step in terms of the confidence to spend that money and to bring that forward.
And if we had concerns that that wasn't going to be sufficient, it sort of seems bad faith on our part to say, go ahead and start planning. If later on we're going to say, actually, you're not meeting the threshold of risk mitigation for the city we want.
So the plan making is done in a framework that has been set out by council, whether it's through city plan and the expectations that are held into there, and then through the various policies that guide its development, whether it's 45 dwellings a hectare or 33. So this isn't just like go plan a blank slate and do what you want. There's been a number of steps that brought us to here. That's all been in line with council approved policy and strategy to see what neighborhood planning looks like and wants to see in terms of that progression of any new plans.
Councillor, if I can just add as well, the recently approved Kendall neighbourhood did have some quite favourable metrics in terms of costs to the city, solely based on the additional density that went into that neighbourhood.
But it's still a loss. It's still assuming a lot of other servicing from a police station over there, a transit station over there, etc. So it's, again, it comes back to a loss is a tax increase. Do we want to approve today to start planning for a small tax increase or a much larger tax increase? And that's where I feel I still don't have the information available to take that plunge. And it doesn't feel fair to just tell our development partners, start shelling out cash for it, even though we might hit the brakes on it because we're still waiting on growth planning, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sorry, I'm way over time.
It's committee, and I'm the chair. Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to express those concerns, Councillor Jans, because I don't want to be, setting unrealistic expectations for the proponent to go ahead and do all this planning when we still seem to have concerns with it. There was some talk about gaps in the terms of reference. Are we better off to go do the work and amend the terms of reference so that there isn't those gaps?
Councillor, the terms of reference that we'll use for this don't have gaps. They're just different than the ones from 2014. So the 2014 one that's being referenced that has these bullets that we're supposed to satisfy now, we've never actually done it that way. We've had to do the planning work before we can have those level of details anyway. So
why are we doing it that way? Why aren't we doing it today's way?
Well, what we're suggesting is that with authorization, we'll be able to implement the new terms of reference, which will allow us to do the planning work that will then allow us to have the information to look at the costing and that entire conversation when the NSP comes forward. And we are working on updated models for how to do that kind of analysis. So we're really hopeful that both Snowberry and Kettle Lakes will come with very well-researched and detailed information about what's a very important topic of interest right now.
Okay. And is there an NSP for Dakota?
No, there's been no work.
So we're kind of boxing it in.
It's anticipated that it would be the last of the neighborhoods, yes.
Councillor, it has a different ownership pattern in there, so it's very difficult. There's a lot of acreages.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. And that is, and part of Dakota includes that arterial road of 17th Street. And if we're not making any changes to that, or will the NSP for Kettle Lakes also include that section of 17th Street? even through Alsace and into Dakota. And how are we going to get people 45 units per hectare, get people in and out of that area?
Councillor, the arterials are generally shared between the plan areas, so you'll get an updated and refined urban cross-section for a minimum of the 2 of the lanes through both Kettle Lakes and Elsie's to support its development and growth.
But there's a chunk that go through Dakota, which we have no NSP for, and I don't think we're anticipating anything in the near future.
We will require the developers of Kettle Lakes to build that. They will collect that money back through the Arterial Road Assessment Fund later on. So they will be owed money. They will be required to build it upon development.
So,
okay.
Councillor Wright, for clarity,
Sorry.
Kim, over here. Sorry, I have to share a mic here. The area structure plan was approved by council, which provides that high-level framework in terms of what to expect for development. The ask here is to go and do more information, get more technical detail to inform the preparation of the neighborhood structure plan. Council will still need to approve the neighborhood structure plan through the public hearing process, so you've seen that before. The terms of reference really just outlines the process and the technical requirements needed to help inform that neighborhood structure plan preparation. So a lot of the questions that council is asking, we're going to figure that out and bring that back along with the costing, which is the integrated infrastructure management plan, which helps us to analyze what the cost to the city is. Now, as it relates to sort of city building, residential neighborhoods are where people live and recreate and play, and then we have our non-residential areas, which are where we have different types of business and investment. And it's on balance, both of those are needed to build our city. And so I think we have to just be mindful that not every neighborhood pays for itself, so to speak, to use some of the conversation here. It's on balance as a city, we think about how we spend our money from the taxes.
And the cost for the IIMP is borne by the developer?
So it's an input into our review from administration, and there's application fees paid by the applicant through the neighborhood plan
And so
process.
do we net out in a positive way city costs?
I think in the planning and development business model, between area structure plan preparation down to building permits, we are cost recovery.
Just to get to the point where it's going to come to public hearing for approval. Like, are we?
I don't have that information at this point in terms of the application costs.
Because, I mean, if there are concerns and my time is almost up, I'm just wondering why we're putting out the money if we still have concerns.
Thank you. Sorry, we're just having some technical difficulties with the microphone you were using. Sorry, do colleagues online need anything repeated?
Yes, please. I didn't hear the responses to the last 2 questions.
We will reach out to tech services
Okay.
Since the microphone is working in the room itself. We're not sure why it's not working online.
Do you want, Ms. Petrin, do you want to just test that microphone again?
Hello? Test. Councillor Rutherford, can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming in loud and clear now. Thank you.
Okay. Can you recap?
Do you want me to?
Sorry to put you on this
No,
spot.
all good. So what I was just sharing was that council has approved the area structure plan. Through the area structure plan, there was identification of a number of neighborhoods. So this neighborhood, the area structure plan outlines at a high level land use, transportation, environmental, and some of those utilities. Now we are hearing the need for additional technical information that will come through the preparation of the neighborhood structure plan. There was discussion about the terms of reference. A terms of reference identifies the process and technical requirements to prepare that plan. So a lot of the information that council is looking for now will come through the preparation of the neighborhood plan. Councillor Wright also asked about the cost to the city in terms of working through this process. Our applicants pay application fees for our city to deliver that service in terms of working through the assessment of the neighborhood plan. It's a short summary. I hope I captured what I covered.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Briquette, I see you on the board.
Yeah, thank you. So when you return with the neighborhood structure plan, and let's say council says, well, we were hoping for a little bit different as far as density or as far as development, developer responsibility or participation. How much work is that actually to go back and have those conversations and then come back to council at that point?
Councilor, it would depend on exactly what was referred back, but
sure.
But that's certainly something that could happen, right? So if the first iteration of the NSP was such that council felt that there needed to be some adjustments, it could be referred back and some work, additional work could be done. We would anticipate through the development of the plan, and the analysis and the public engagement, we'd probably get pretty close, or we should be. So hopefully it wouldn't be too significant if that was the case.
So I guess what I'm struggling with is that the optimum order of operations. So for example, let's say council said, actually, we're not going to move forward with this yet today because we want more detail. It's very difficult to get that more detail without actually developing the detail for a neighborhood structure plan. So we'd be asking you to develop a neighborhood structure plan using the ASP framework. I could be wrong. Just let me know.
I would say the detail to the level that is provided for you and all of council at the approval stage would be next to impossible to compile. Further to that, it's currently not in sort of any of our planning programs or budgets to do such analysis or pre-planning analysis to bring that forward. So that would be a very different conversation in terms of how we do that work and in what framework do we bring that work forward, because right now our plans and policies guide us towards this orderly planning and development process, which NSP comes after the ASP, and that detail comes when it comes to council for approval.
Okay. Yeah, what I'm looking for is just clarity on, and I know everyone probably feels they've been clear, but in plain language, what is the impact? There's two things. What is the impact of not approving this today financially for the city, as far as delays for revenue coming in? And two, at this stage, if you were sent back to bring more information, what level of detail could you get to without being able to move forward with a neighborhood structure plan?
Second question first. The level of detail would be similar to what is and has been provided in the ASP, which is approved by council. And that included a high-level overview of the integrated infrastructure management plan. So that gives you a broad overview of the entire area, not necessarily the neighborhood specific in terms of Kettle Lakes. And I'm not sure how that study was created. I think we're about 10 years ago now, so it would have to be updated with varying different numbers. In terms of what would it take, I think that was the first question. Oh, I forgot. I should answer that one first.
The financial impact on the city as far as delayed revenue.
Well, the delay would be in a couple of years in terms of actually seeing development on these lands. But in general, we talk about completing networks and moving forward to get arterials built, infrastructure built. Without development, none of that happens. So in order to help facilitate the completion of the overall Dakota ASP network, needs to progress. I don't have a figure in terms of a daily expense rate in terms of a delay.
And as far as communities paying for themselves, in many ways that is determined by the mill rate and tax rate.
That's one lever to pull, yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm just mindful of the time. We're 20 minutes from our lunch break. So in the interests of time, I'm going to put a motion on the floor that the January 20th, 2026 Urban Planning and Economy Report UPE 03162 be referred back to administration for further analysis on the authorization of the Kettle Lakes NSP based on growth management principles, including forecast completion of surrounding neighborhoods and key infrastructure connections. And so as a brief introduction to that, I think this has been a really fruitful conversation, and I appreciate there's a lot of nuance when we're looking at the level of information that's required at different levels. I think administration is absolutely correct in cautioning us for wanting all the information at this stage. That's not feasible. I think it's fair that there be some level of certainty prior to the development community investing in the many technical studies that are required to inform the NSP. For me, though, there's a separate level of detail and different types of information that we require at the authorization stage. As we mentioned, we go through this process to ensure orderly development, to confirm that there's not leapfrogging, to confirm that future neighborhoods are well connected and well serviced. And at present, I don't believe I have the information to make that determination. I would note that in our previous terms of reference, NSP terms of reference, there was a section that outlined the type of information required at the authorization stage, including, so this is again for the pre-authorization, looking at existing infrastructure and the funded, unfunded commitment for the sector, current population capacity, availability and timing of support of city infrastructure, relationship of proposed NSP to transit, and significant environmental impacts. I don't know that that's exactly all the ones that we need, but I think that we do need some consideration of the analysis that informs us that now is the time and this is the right neighborhood to commence, again, what is an expensive and time-consuming process to prepare the NSP. I'll also foreshadow a subsequent motion that I think speaks to the broader policy gap that I think we heard from today. Just looking at ensuring that we have a robust framework and a new section in the NSP terms of reference to ensure that this is standard procedure moving forward. So leave it there. Happy to take questions and look forward to comments from my colleagues. Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Thank you. So to administration, this does seem pretty straightforward. And we likely have some of this high-level work already done. How long would it take to return with this?
So there's a number of options here. The first one being the information at the ASP level we have and we can compile. We can provide a memo to council as this progresses towards a council vote if the committee so chooses. And so relatively quickly, I would say, in terms of a ASP level analysis that's out there and also published through our various documents online.
Okay, so yeah, because what it looks like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's just saying, okay, so can you analyze how the surrounding neighborhoods get completion of key infrastructure? And that's about it. But is that all you're saying as well? No, not to administration.
Yeah, so this it's looking for information on, the progress for forecasting the completion of the surrounding neighborhoods and where those key infrastructure connections are. So potentially could suggest, and I'll just look to the team to give me a thumbs up or not, if this report's intended to go to council next week, and if we could attach this as a attachment to that report, or send in a memo in advance. Ideally, this could still align with recommendation to council for authorizing the plan.
So
rather than referring it back.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We are still having technical difficulties with that particular microphone.
Seems to be just when I speak. Apologies.
Is that any better for those online?
You're soft-spoken. Lean right in.
So maybe I'll just quickly quickly summarize, which was the suggestion that this could potentially still move forward to council next week with an appendix of further information.
Okay, sure. And to the mover, does that satisfy your question if they do include an attachment and send a memo to council?
Yeah, I think it's a good thought. I think my concern is if council isn't always the best place for a more engaged conversation. When is and perhaps the next urban planning committee would be the more appropriate return date.
When is the next urban planning committee meeting?
I believe it's February 9th.
February 9th. And I'm just wondering if a report of this nature for information on how surrounding neighborhoods get key infrastructure connections would require a large debate. So, I mean, really, it's up to the mover how you want to proceed. I would absolutely support an attachment or a memo. Would you find it friendly to amend that?
My preference would be a due date of February 3rd urban planning committee, but happy to entertain that as a
You'd like to
motion.
have a debate? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, there it is.
Councillor,
Thank you.
just to clarify, February 10th, I think, is the Urban Planning Committee. February 3rd is a public hearing.
Oh, thank you. February 10th, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor...
I'm sorry, can we confirm that with the clerk? Because our calendar's reading the 3rd is UPC.
The February 10th is UPC.
Okay, then our calendar needs an update. Sorry, my apologies. Correct.
Thank you, no trouble. Mayor Knack, I see you on the board.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, everyone, I can't be there in person, just a little under the weather right now. I just wanted to flag and confirming with the clerks the February 10th, which might also be a February 9th and 10th Urban Planning Committee, may be fairly large with speakers. And so for me, I guess, I guess maybe I'll just do it simple. I would rather make an amendment to have it come to council next week, because I believe the agenda on the 9th and 10th is going to be pretty extensive and would not give us time to discuss it. So,
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Knack. That's a fair point. And the following Urban Planning Committee meeting after February 3rd, I think, is not until March.
That's correct.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate my colleagues. I think then I would consider that friendly. Could we get some advice on the wording of the motion to achieve that outcome?
And so it would be preferred to have an amendment because the original motion is to be referred back to administration. So now,
perhaps we could just add at the end of this and return to a future city council meeting. Because we can refer it back, you can make amendments. If we don't refer it back, I don't believe they can bring anything different to council. So we refer it back. So at the end of this sentence, we'll just add and return to a future city council meeting. Does that suit?
That does.
yeah, I think we could just specify the next council meeting. I'm good with that. I think we'll have the capacity.
Just to be clear on expectations, what we would bring back is an attachment to the report, and not attachment and a memo, just the attachment.
Correct, yeah. Thank you, Mayor Knack.
Perfect. I have just one last question. As you come back next week, I think the only other question I take away from our conversation today is, appreciate when we do the ASP, the NSPs, and the IIMP. Sorry, a lot of acronyms there. We discussed this at a public hearing, and so I don't know if it's Ms. Inkton or someone from our legal team. Generally speaking, while we include things like the integrated infrastructure management plan, the financials aren't as valid of a land use consideration as some of the other pieces that you discussed. It's not that we can't discuss it, it doesn't have the same weight. Is that correct?
So I think, Mr. Mayor, that's a great question, and I'm glad that you asked it. So I think when we take these items to public hearing, we really have to go back to sort of our guiding star in terms of Part 17 and land use planning, which includes the economical development of land. So I think if we couch this in terms of the economical development of land overall, I think it's irrelevant and it's within your purview to consider. But I think we want to be just a bit careful about getting really, really deep into the specifics of that and more sort of considering it like as a general sort of overall, is this an economical use and development of land?
And so maybe the question, not to answer today per se, I could think about it over the next week here, is that if we authorize this, which I'm comfortable authorizing it, can we change it so that actually the first check-in for an NSP before the public hearing is actually a committee meeting where we can dig into the financials in a bit more of a meaningful way to have that thoughtful conversation about possible tax impacts, all of that, before then you go have the land use conversation. So I don't know if anyone's thought about that, so you don't need to answer today if you haven't thought about that, but that might be a possible path forward in the future of bringing these NSPs to committee first so we can understand the financials. Thoughts on that, or should I just wait till next week to ask that?
I think from the legal perspective, Mr. Mayor, it's something that I'm definitely willing to take away and sort of dig into and think through just in terms of risk and reward on that. But I would leave it to administration on their end, but from the legal perspective, something that I can definitely look into.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, we would have to think through in terms of what that process and what the outcomes we would want to achieve and how to create a simple path forward so that we're not crossing lines.
Yeah, and maybe it's just the IIMP part itself. But anyways, okay, well, you can all think about that. I'll think about that, and maybe that can be a motion next week for how we advance this work and have appropriate check-ins. So, okay, that's it. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wright?
Very quickly, I'm just wondering, when you're looking at the forecast of completion of surrounding neighborhoods, I am concerned with Dakota that it's going to end up like Wernerville and being boxed in there. So will that will be addressed?
Not through this analysis. Dakota is identified as a neighborhood within the Dakota ASP. And that, as that planning progresses, we'll have to look at that as we move that forward.
But because we're doing, okay, well, I guess maybe I'll just wait to see what your analysis is, but that is my concern, is that we're developing all around Dakota and it's just going to be stuck there, like I said, like Wernerville. And then the other concern that I did have with it coming back to council is we would not have then the opportunity to ask any questions of the proponent.
Correct.
So I will leave that up to committee as to whether or not they want it to come back to council or committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I really, really appreciate the discussion. I think, you know, I'm comfortable with us moving to council next week with the additional information, and then at that point, we do always have the ability to refer it back to committee if necessary, or if we need to hear from speakers. Councillor Jans, I see you on the board.
Just on the timing, I don't understand why this can't wait till March or April or May or June. I don't understand what the urgency is. We're here today.
We have a proponent looking to start the planning stages of this neighborhood. So in terms of following the general progression of planning and development, this is that next step. So when someone's ready to go, we look to facilitate that.
But they may be ready to go, but I don't hear that we are ready to go. I don't hear that we have all this information that we need, that we're worried about the isolation, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I guess I'd ask the mover, like, why not make the amendment March? Like, we need as a city to make sure that we're doing our risk mitigation and our protection here, and I don't hear that we have that confidence. We don't have a chance to have a public committee. We don't have a chance to have a conversation. And just because we have a busy February committee meeting, I think let's do this. Let's do this sequence.
If you would like to speak, you could go on the board, I think.
It's a point of order.
Yes.
The councillor is saying we are not ready I think what he means is some on council may not be ready.
No, I'm not.
Sorry,
That's not a point of order.
I am
It
not.
is-
I am not.
I'm gonna
He's
rule against the
including
point of
other
order.
councillors in a decision that has not been made and in a mindset that other councillors may not be sharing.
I think it's a fair caution.
Point of order, I don't believe that is a point of order.
I will
I'll leave it
just-
to the clerks.
Perhaps we could review the criteria for points of order. If we have that handy. I think at this point, we have 3 minutes left. Your caution is noted. I would like to call the vote on this motion. And I would actually just move at this point through unanimous consent that we extend by 5 minutes so that we can complete this item. And I know there are a few notices of motion as well. Is that unanimous consent? Yeah. Is that all right with our delegation and staff? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask folks to sign up to speak to this. Councillor Jans?
I guess I'm still on the board, and I didn't get a question from the mover. Are you okay with the March committee date instead?
I think that we still have safeguards if it comes to council and we're unsatisfied with the information, that we can refer back to March. But if we are satisfied with the information, then there's no reason to hold it up unnecessarily.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Anyone to speak? Not seeing anyone racing. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Clark.
Sorry, I'll jump in here, just listening intently and everything. Just to the mover, just to be clear, we're not debating whether this is going to be a neighborhood. This is going to be a neighborhood. We're debating whether we have enough information right now to move forward on the next steps. If I can just kind of summarize from a general perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's seeking to ensure that we are conducting thoughtful analysis about the timing and pace of our continued growth.
That's the only question I had.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll go one last time. Anyone to speak? All right, well, I'll take a moment to just briefly close. Again, really appreciate the robust conversation today. I mean, just to our applicants and to our staff, you know, I'm sure that there will be supporting information that will give us the confidence to move forward. We just want to ensure that this I should speak for myself. I am hoping to ensure that we have clear policies and procedures that inform the decisions that we make. I find it difficult when a decision is put before us with no supporting analysis or framework for how we make that decision. I think it's a gap and something that we need to consider in our broader policy framework. So I mentioned a subsequent motion that I'm planning to make. I'm going to refine that a bit further and bring it forward to council next week. But I think this is a really important opportunity in a critical way that we provide clarity for the development industry, for Edmontonians, about when and how we grow, and ensuring that we're doing that in a way that's financially sustainable and leads to the orderly development of our communities. It's critically important, and I think administration has heard this point, that it's not just what's been planned at the ASP level, it's what's actually been delivered. I know that we have often had plans that haven't come to pass. And when we have ASPs that are partially complete, multiple neighborhoods that are partially complete, that creates strain and pressures on our finances as a city, and also leads to communities being incomplete for many years, leading to lower quality of life for those residents. So that's the importance of this. That's why I think we need to be giving it full attention and appreciate the conversation today. So with that, I will call for the vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That's carried. So I believe that concludes item 7.2. Do we have any notices of motions?
Just a quick one.
Okay, Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, and before I do, apologies to the chair, it was a point of privilege, not a point of order.
And
okay.
at all times, you must still listen to the chair And you have to wait for the chair to give the floor, but thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. The administration provided a report based on public feedback and industry best practices outlining options, costs, and implications for a snow and ice control surge capacity strategy to ensure timely service delivery during unexpected or extreme precipitation events, including 1, an operational analysis of projected extreme weather frequency based on current climate modeling and climate data, and 2, mechanisms to scale resources, including but not limited to retainers for on-call private contracting and emergency procurement to meet service levels outlined in the Snow and Ice Control Administrative Procedures when accumulation exceeds city-owned and standard contract capacity, and 3, specific strategies to prioritize accessibility with consideration of the active pathway network in areas of high social vulnerability index during these surge events, including but limited to more proactive crosswalk and access point windrow removal and clearing, and for any other strategies or enhancements that could improve service delivery. And I will be making that notice at the next available council meeting, due date August 2026, in alignment with the Snow and Ice Control Policy Review.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, I have one notice at the January 27th City Council meeting. I plan to move the following motion: that the Urban Planning and Economy 2026 operating expenditure budget be increased by $75,000 on a one-time basis with funding from the 2026 Council contingency to provide funding support for Backroads Reclamation to undertake their wood recycling facility, and 2, that the city manager enter into a municipal funding agreement with Backroads Reclamation in the form and content agreeable to the city manager, including a condition that the facility be located within the City of Edmonton boundaries. And with that, we are adjourned at 12:03. Thank you all very much.